Cool. All right, guys. So welcome back to another episode of Cool Story Bro. I've got Emil, Lynn, Rupert, and Petter, and today we want to talk about fasting for health and longevity. And so fasting is, I think, quite a sort of buzzword now in the paleo community and health. A lot of people talk about intermittent fasting. I think that's how most people would think of it. So for those who don't know, intermittent fasting is kind of like the idea that you eat your calories within a certain sort of period of time within the day. So you're not just eating all day long. And there's been some really good studies coming more and more into mainstream now. People like Sachin Panda and other guys sort of talking about the benefits of how you can reverse a lot of sort of modern diseases like diabetes just by reducing your windows. So you're not eating, let's say, 12 hours a day, but you're maybe eating in a 6-hour, 8-hour window. Even up to 9 hours seems to have quite a lot of benefits for reversing all these sort of markers of disease that leads to things like diabetes. So intermittent fasting, I think a lot of people know about. It's pretty standard. I don't know if we need to get into a lot of detail on that specifically. And that's something you can kind of do pretty much day after day, right? That's like a standard way of eating almost. It becomes like a lifestyle. So it's not just like a diet where you do it for a week or 2 weeks and then you go back to your previous way of eating. Like this is just something that once you learn how to eat like this, you realize that your body actually has a lot more strength. Basically what happens when you're not taking in calories is your body will start to burn its own fat for calories. And so you can get a lot of energy just from that. And so, my personal sort of story with this is I started experimenting with fasting about 10 years ago. And actually, it wasn't intermittent fasting that I started with. I got into that later, but I started doing the sort of prolonged extended fasting. So this is like where you don't eat for, 1, 3, 5, 7, 10 days or more. And there's different ways of doing that. Some people, when they get into fasting, they hear about a juice fast or a green juice fast. And it's funny that Emil's eating, but it's all good. I'll be eating after this call. But yeah, so this idea of extended fasting is a little bit different from intermittent fasting. It's obviously something you do maybe once or twice a year, and the sort of payoffs and benefits are a bit different. So depends how you're doing it. Some people do like a juice fast where they're just restricting heavy foods like meat and stuff. And obviously there's a lot of traditions. If you look into almost every religion, there's some form of fasting, like the Muslims have Ramadan, Christians and Jews, and pretty much every old religion has it built in somewhere. And when you see that kind of common thread, stuff that's built into every religion, every sort of tradition, is usually because there's something behind it, right? It's like some humans have worked something out a long time ago and they decided to keep doing it. And it doesn't really matter what religion or belief system you have, everyone's doing it for a reason, right? So it's pretty common across all the faiths. So that was kind of interesting to me when I first got into it. I was like, okay, what's going on there? No one's really talking about fasting. I was looking at it more from, like just curious to see what would happen. I think a lot of people are scared that they can't skip a meal or a few days without eating. Like you hear all these things like you don't eat in 3 days, you're going to die or something, like, all these scare stories around it. So there's a lot of sort of myths and superstitions, but I got into about 10 years ago and I did sort of first juice fasting, then green juice fasting. And obviously green juice fasting, you've got, less sugar and carbs because it's just no fruit. It's just like green juice. Then I got into water fasting, which is no calories at all. And basically your digestion system shuts down a lot more because there's nothing going through it. You're just drinking water. And then dry fasting is the more extreme version where you're not even drinking any water. So some people are quite strict and they don't touch water, like they don't take showers, they don't brush their teeth. It's a dry fasting, no water contact. And some people are just like, I don't drink water, but I'm still going to jump in the ocean, or I'm still going to brush my teeth or whatever, so take a shower. Like that's the sort of dry fasting I do. I'm not super extreme, but it took me a while to kind of get there, and you'll see a huge difference. I did a 17-day water fast about 3 years ago now, and that was actually pretty easy for me. After the first couple of days, what's interesting is, what is that, Emil? Is that fly? It's got something to share with us. If you can find its unmute button.
I think the fly just wants to hear about fasting as well.
Oh, okay, great. We'll tune him in. I don't know. So, what was I saying? So the first couple of days typically is the hardest when it comes to fasting, because a lot of it is just breaking a pattern, right? We're in so many sort of different patterns, sort of automatic things. We just wake up and eat every day and do everything every day like we normally do. And when you interrupt or break a pattern, that's when it's kind of hardest, because your brain doesn't really know what's going on. It's like looking for trying to understand, what's going on, something strange is different today. And obviously if people are eating around you and all kinds of other things like that, then mentally and socially, it's quite hard to sort of step away from that. So the first couple of days is actually the hardest. once your body gets over that initial adjustment, it basically goes into ketosis, which is where I said, it starts burning its own fat for fuel. And then actually you've got a lot of energy coming in as well from that process. You don't feel super tired or weak. I would say, for some people starting out, if you are quite unhealthy, for example, like quite obese or have some major, metabolic condition, then fasting can be a bit dangerous because you obviously are burning up a lot of whatever's released in your fat cells, and that can go into your blood and stuff. So this is not always something that should be undertaken without supervision. I would say it's a kind of individual process for everyone to step into and just experiment and kind of based on where you are on your journey, right? So I was already quite healthy. I felt quite confident. Nothing's bad going to happen if I start fasting. And I'd done already green juice fast and juice fast before. And the 70-day water fast, like I said, for me was actually quite easy. After the first couple of days, it was just, I was in a very good space. I was drinking when I was thirsty. But what I found was that I actually lost quite a lot of strength. Obviously, there's like a payoff to all of this, right? So some of my initial experiences with fasting were super positive just because of that. You almost go into a different state of like awareness or consciousness where you're very disconnected from your body in a way that you're not digesting and eating all the time. You're not thinking about food. And so it's proven that all kinds of things change physiologically, when people are in a fasted state, and you tend to become much sharper generally with like thought and clarity. Like people are fasting now for 5-7 days sometimes in Silicon Valley, just as like a biohack to like be more productive and creative and stuff. So there's different ways of going about it. But I think generally, yeah, it's good to ease in with shorter fasts, like 1, 2, 3 days. Those are quite safe. Beyond like 3 days, there's more changes in the body you have to kind of be aware of and just make sure you're strong going into the fast. I think that's the part that I didn't really appreciate until some of the more recent fasts is that, yeah, if you go, for example, into a long water fast, what happens is your body will start to break down fat, but it also will start to break down muscle. And so over time, you're losing that muscle and muscle mass every day. And there's a lot of benefits to fasting that makes that worthwhile, because obviously when you finish the fast, you can eat again, you can put back on the muscle and the fat. But what's happening while you're fasting is your body is basically chewing up and eating all the sort of disease, the old cells. So if you look into like the theories of aging, there's this thing called senescent cells. And these are things basically, the cells that stop, they malfunction basically. And there's normally a process called apoptosis and autophagy, which is the process by which these disease cells get sort of recycled, right? Eaten up, recycled, and they disappear from the body, right? They get reused. And if you're constantly eating and you never have that break of eating, then this process never happens. So this is what's pretty much happening today, is that we grow up in this world where food is constantly available, and our biology is completely not built for that. We're built for these times of feasting when there's food around, and they were built for these times where it could be days, weeks when there's just not much food. And during those times, your body has learned to eat itself, basically. So starvation is a form of cannibalism, right? But it's beneficial in that sense that the body has built that design and that autophagy to happen during those times. So while you're eating your fat and your muscle, you're also cleaning out all the old and diseased cells. And these senescent cells, if they don't get cleared out, they basically cause a lot of disease over time. So they have sort of inflammation that they give out, like signaling, and it basically it sort of attracts, or it hits other cells around it in the proximity. So then those senescent cells start to form sort of clusters, and there's basically over time you have these huge colonies of senescent cells in your body, and they're not contributing anything to the physiology, like they're not doing anything useful, but they're costing you energy, right? Because every time you eat or something, that's going to obviously take up energy. Those cells, just like cancer cells, they're going to use that energy. So you basically, your metabolism becomes less efficient because you're feeding all these sort of parasites almost in your body that no longer do anything for you. They're just kind of like hanging on like freeloaders. So I kind of compare this to socialism, which is kind of funny, right? You have these people not contributing to society. They're just like taking away energy from the host. And this is kind of how the world is in a lot of ways now. But it's in the body very much so that if you had that state, you're basically going to age and die much quicker because you can't, you're not efficient, you're not lean, you're a lot of your energy being diverted to, parasites, but essentially. And so the senescent cells, they don't survive longer fasting. I think intermittent fasting will clean up some of that damage. The most damaged cells within 18, 20 hours, they'll start to get recycled. But if you go on extended fast where you do it for 5, 10, 15, 20 days, there's a long period of time where this autophagy is basically eating away all those old and diseased cells as well. So that's a sort of benefit in the upside, and obviously that results in more longevity. You can live a longer life. When you come out of a fast, you will feel much stronger once you rebuild your body, because you don't have all those diseased cells kind of feeding off you. So you're much leaner. Your metabolism is much more efficient. Every calorie you eat is going to go into your body for a real purpose, not just to support some cells that have stopped working, basically. So this cellular senescence is quite a key concept to understand. It's pretty easy as I've just explained it. But that's the sort of main benefit physically. Now, mentally and emotionally, there's tons of other benefits of like realizing how powerful your body is when it can actually survive without food. Because I think in some way, obviously, you know, we're so used to enjoying food, we don't really question how life can be without it, and why would you not eat when there's food around and you can eat, right? But one thing it really makes you appreciate is it obviously resets your palate. So whatever you eat, you know, afterwards tastes 10 times more amazing. Like sometimes when you get used to eating a lot of refined foods and sugars and fats, then normal and simple food tastes sort of bland, right? And you can't enjoy food unless you put lots of chili on it, or you put lots of salt, or you put, you know, just lots of sugar in your diet, and we get kind of cravings basically. So the fasting process kind of removes all that because it resets all the palate. It'll kill off all the gut bacteria as well. That kind of maybe is like stuff that shouldn't be there from a bad diet. So just general sort of imbalances and overgrowths in the body. Fasting is a natural sort of mechanism to balance it out. And, you know, you can think of just like everything in nature works like cyclically, right? There's cycles for everything. So you have a cycle of like growth, and we call that in the body, you know, anabolism, where you're putting on muscle, putting on mass when you're growing. When you're eating, that's a process of anabolism, right? You're adding to your mass. And then you have catabolism, where basically there's a sort of cycle of sort of taking away or starvation and regeneration. So you need both those cycles for the body to work. If you just have constant anabolism, then that's basically constant cancer cell growth. That's why 1 in 2 people are getting cancer today, on average, you know, because it's just constant growth, and obviously growth with the worst kind of foods today, like, you know, refined fats and sugars. So you need the balance in that process of the body to work. We're designed with that balance, with that cycle, to have that anabolism, to have that catabolism. If you have one without the other, you die both ways, right? If you just keep fasting until you die, you have constant catabolism, that's obviously death. So the other way around is also death. It's just a different form of death. So it's really learning to embrace that part, that cycle that we never really taught about, never really have to engage with. And in terms of, you know, the cost to it, obviously, like I said before, you're losing sort of muscle and fat mass. And so you will come out of it initially perhaps weaker, and it takes time to sort of rebuild the body back to full health. So there's definitely some sort of keys to think about when you're going on a fast. Is, you know, what am I doing it for? How am I going to enter the fast? Like, do I need to prepare? Do I need to change anything to make it easier, like my environment? Maybe I want to be in more nature, and I'll talk about this as well, like some sort of ways of experimenting with the longer fasts, what's worked for me, what's really helped. And then also the people you're around, the stress you're under, because you don't really have a lot of extra energy to engage with things you normally would. Like, I won't really want to be talking to a lot of people. I don't want to be in a stressful job, for example. I don't want to be having to deal with a lot of bullshit, basically. I want to be in a quiet place, peace and quiet, lots of nature, lots of sunlight, so I can take an energy from the sun. And actually, a lot of the energy needs that we try and get from food is because we don't get a lot of sunlight. So I've talked about ATP before, this molecule that powers all the cells in the, you know, in the body. You need to make this ATP, and you can make it from sunlight, but you can also make it, if you don't have sunlight, from food. And so we've so overcompensated for a lack of sunlight with just more and more food in our diet, and that's another reason we have constant anabolism. And when you have enough sunlight, the catabolism thing comes easy because it actually switches off appetite. That's one of the signaling things that the sunlight does, because there's a mechanism to make that ATP with sunlight. So it doesn't need to constantly tell you to eat. So this sort of cycle happens much more naturally in nature, in sunlight. You know, so in the summer it's much easier to fast, for example, than in the winter. I wouldn't really recommend to fast in the winter when it's cold, because you're going to get a lot more signals to eat. That's just how the body works. But yeah, so the water fasting is, for me, maybe slightly, I would say, safer or just mentally easier for some people to believe than dry fasting, because the idea of like telling someone, okay, you can't drink any water either, like that's just going to stretch all their belief systems at once, right? So you have to kind of stretch into this as far as your belief system will let you go. And that's kind of how it is with fasting. It's just as much a mental game as a physical game. So with the water fasting, it's like, yeah, okay, I can kind of believe that. I'll do it for a few days. But when you really get deep into this and you compare and you contrast, you actually realize dry fasting is way superior for a few reasons. One is that when you're dry fasting, you lose much more fat mass compared to muscle mass. So what I mentioned on the water fast is losing fat and muscle mass at roughly the same ratio, right? You break down 1 pound of fat and 1 pound of muscle to feed the body at the same time, you know. So if you're doing a dry fast, it's a bit different, because the body will need to get water as well, because you're not drinking water, and the only place you can get that is from fat. So your body actually burns fat at a much higher ratio than muscle. So you're losing less muscle mass relative to the overall, you know, body recomposition that's going on. So you'll be burning a bunch of fat. You're still burning a bit of muscle, but not as much as on a water fast. So when you're doing an extended fast, like 5, 10, 15 days, that's really, really noticeable, that effect, that you don't lose as much strength. The the other issue with water fasting is that you're basically drinking in water, but then you're peeing out everything, right? So when you pee out, you're peeing out, let's say twice a day or something, you're peeing out all the minerals essentially stored in your body, and you're losing a lot of minerals over time. So again, if you're not replacing that because you're not eating, that's going to have a big cost to your strength and your overall sort of health over time. The quality of the water is also important, which I think a lot of people don't really understand. I know I did a water fast with not great water, to be honest. It was just like plastic bottled water, and I was still okay, because I was fairly healthy, but I wouldn't do that again. And so this concept of like, okay, I'm peeing out minerals, I'm not getting them back in, I'm not replacing that. Some people, they take salts and things when they're doing fasts, electrolyte drinks and things like that, which I don't really consider like fasting. I mean, you can try that to experiment with. Again, if that's the edge of your safety belief system, then just do that. But once you get into dry fasting, you realize, okay, the upside is I'm burning way more fat, then I'm not losing as much muscle, I'm not peeing out my minerals, so I'm maintaining all those salts in my body, and that actually gives you more strength and more power. And the water I do need, personally, I just go into the ocean or, I take a shower, and the body can absorb a lot of moisture through the skin. So whatever water I actually need is going to come through in that form, but I'm peeing much, much less. So that's kind of the sort of overview. Like, I've done a 70-day water fast. The dry fasting is much harder in a way because you need to really get it more energy from other sources. Like I tried to do a dry fast about a year after the water fast, and I could only do 2 days, and I completely bonked. Like after 2 days, I was just done. And this is before I got really into sun gazing and spending a lot more time outside in nature. So I was still like a totally indoor creature. My body hadn't learned how to become light adapted. So I could talk about this sort of adaptation of rewilding your body, becoming fat adapted, cold adapted, light adapted. So all these sort of signals our body would normally have in a natural environment that we don't get today, and how that kind of affects our health. So when you're fat adapted, obviously from intermittent fasting and extended fasting, no, Ollie, that's a 17-day, 1-7. I did a 7-day water fast in Singapore, and that was actually while I was working, 3 jobs, 7 days a week. So again, it's not ideal. It's just things I experiment with, and I stopped that one eventually mentally, because my wife just kept putting really good food in my face. And so, this is again a good example of what you learn when you're fasting, what to do and what not to do. But yeah, coming out of that fast, I was quite tired because I'd obviously peed out a lot of minerals. I lost a lot of muscle mass, and I tried to do some push-ups, and I was like, damn, I'm like, complete wimp again. So your ego takes a bit of a hit, and again, that's just something you have to kind of manage and deal with and accept. Yeah, I've been through this cycle a few times, but my strength is going to come back. It's not an issue. But just to finish on my previous point, fat adapted, cold adapted, and light adapted, once you get those 3 things really wired into the body, you have so much strength and power that comes from all these other places that food kind of takes a secondary role in powering the body. And light adapted, especially when you're taking in the sunlight, it's so much easier to power the body for fasting, whether that be intermittent fasting or prolonged extended fasting. And so, once I started doing that regularly, I went to do a 7-day fast. Did that a couple years ago in Portugal, and that was just really spontaneous. That I was in a lot of sunlight and felt really good and didn't feel hungry at all, because like I said, sunlight switches off the appetite, and I realized I'm just eating purely for habit and not feeling hungry. So I just stopped eating, and I stopped drinking as well. I was like, I'm not thirsty either. And I was swimming in the ocean every day, and I just thought, let me just see how it feels. Like, I had no goal in mind. This is the other thing with the fasting, is if you set a really big target or goal, then sometimes the ego gets in the way. You need to really listen to your body and understand day to day how you're feeling, and really trust, okay, maybe now is a good time to stop, or I'm going to listen to my body, or I'm going to see how I feel tomorrow. So you kind of take it more in the moment and not try and set big goals that then, you disappoint yourself, like, oh, I didn't hit 7 days or 10 days. Like, that's just all ego. It's really a process of just testing, and you've got, many times you can have a go at this. So the 7-day was just totally easy. After that, again, I stopped because my wife wasn't happy and comfortable with what I was doing, and just, it was new for both of us. So I just stopped for her account, because, that's how it is with women. Sometimes you have to it's just easier, So, but it was a really important lesson for me that, after 7 days, I felt great and amazing. And it was like way longer than I thought I would go without food and water. And so I thought, okay, I want to do this again soon. And so I actually got a chance again last year, and I went up to this time 11 days. And again, like I knew I could do at least 7 days because I'd done it before, right? So that's my new belief system. That's what I've stretched myself to. And then after that, it was just day by day. I'm just going to see how I feel. Every day I wake up and I sort of, just check in. And after 11 days, again, I was quite mentally tired, not physically so much, but mentally a bit drained. And so I decided to stop. And, that was for me, again, like a huge win, because I, again, stretched my belief system. And those deeper healings you get with dry fasting, it just cleans out all those dead cells, all those senescent cells, whatever possible cancer cells are there. Like, there's always cancer cells in the body. If you look at the physiology, it's just the balance of how the disease is managed by your immunity and things like that. So when you have these longer fasting cycles, you really have the chance to clean out anything that potentially is aging you faster, giving you disease, giving you stress. So it's really one of the keys to health. I think it's that's why it's in every religion, right? It's in every tradition for a reason. The body is designed to do it. We need to kind of use our willpower a little bit because we don't have it forced on us because we have food all the time around us. The other thing that's interesting is that, like I said, when your palate's reset, is that you make better choices around food because you become aware of how much food changes you. And so if you eat like, let's say you eat a donut or something a couple days after fast, you'll be like, this thing tastes like shit. I just feel like really shit. And so, whereas before it was just like your body was used to that, right? So it kind of handled it. Same with alcohol, same with a lot of other poisons and things we normally just put in our bodies. We don't really understand the effect of it because we're so used to it. And so it really resets everything. So you're much more sort of aware and attuned to what's going in your body, and you just generally make better choices. So a lot of these things about people trying to diet all the time, diet and exercise, using up so much willpower to try and change your body or change your health. But sometimes the easiest way is just to take away everything. And then, what you put back in, you're naturally going to make better choices. And your body doesn't want those foods anymore because it doesn't have the same bacteria, the same whatever was craving it inside of you. So that's really what I wanted to share, just to sort of start with in terms of opening up discussion a bit about my story. And obviously I've talked about fasting a lot with you guys individually. So no, Lynn, you're actually on a fast at the moment. I'm just curious, get your perspective, like how have you approached it? Is this your first fast? And then what's your feedback and experience like, and why did you sort of decide to do it?
Yeah, so did touched about intermittent fasting before, where I have feeding windows and so on. That wasn't too much of an issue. Like you were saying, it's the start that's the hardest bit, and I found the secret for me. I mean, because I've not been out in nature. I've been out quite a bit, but I've not been out and about too much during this. It's only been like just over a day now, a dry fast. I thought, let's just see if I can do it. But I found what I had to do was just not be around anyone or anything to do with food, just because I was aware that my reptilian part of my brain is going to probably want to kick in and go, you know what, come on, Krispy Kremes is around the corner, we can do this. But no, it's been pretty cool. I love challenging myself anyway. I love the idea of being more in control of my own mind and body. A lot of people fast in other ways, not just feel like they'll say like they'll social media fast or something like that. I think for a lot of people, it's probably for the same goal, that you're trying to get at least the feeling of mental and control of your time and your thoughts as best possible. I haven't watched TV for years. I mean, I watch shows, but I don't watch television because those subliminal messages of adverts, just trying to buy this or do that. Is just there's little things like that. I think everyone's kind of doing it in their own way. But yes, but back to the food, the dry fast. So I remember hearing you talk when I was talking about, and I've read about potential issues with water fasting, and that you're able to obtain water naturally from fats, which I was aware of anyway. But one question I do have actually is, when you were dry fasting, when you were water fasting in particular, were you limiting or were you controlling the frequency of water you was intaking, or was you just going with what everybody felt it needed?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think again, there's a lot of sort of conditioning around you need to drink 2 liters or 8 glasses a day. Like there's just so much bullshit around what people believe they need. And so people tend to overhydrate to compensate when they're not eating. They're like, oh, I need to make sure I'm drinking enough. And then just end up drinking way too much. And actually that again just means you're peeing out more minerals. So I would say like drink to thirst, and what people again think of as thirst is relative, like when your mouth gets a bit dry, that's not really thirst. When you're like, I feel a little bit lightheaded now, maybe that's closer to thirst, right? So somewhere sort of in between those two.
Sure.
Like again, it just comes with experience, knowing your body. So I would say don't try and restrict it. Don't try and overhydrate. Just listen to your body. What I also played around with was like just like intermittent fasting, where you have a window, right, where you're eating. You do the same thing with water. So you're not drinking all day long, but you have like a window, maybe a 2-hour window or a 4-hour window, and you drink whatever you need in that window. And then you're going to be able to drink again the next day at that time. So you don't need to be worrying about, am I going to be hydrated or not? You just wait till that time, and then you've basically had a 20-hour, for example, dry period, and you still get to drink. But that 20-hour dry period, again, just accelerate the fast massively. So there's kind of in between a water fast and a dry fast, but it's like intermittent fasting with water, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, regarding all that does make sense. And you were saying about the reintroduction of foods earlier. I mean, it doesn't feel like it's going to be an issue for me. I'm not particularly unhealthy, I'm aware of. Pretty clean my foods, far than aware. Nothing man-made, trying to keep it right. But after having such a long dry fast that you did have, what was your method of reintroducing foods back in? Because I'm assuming it's like, they say if you suffer from starvation, you don't just start eating because your body can go into shock. What did you do to make sure that kind of didn't happen? Or did it happen?
Yeah, I would say like up to 3 to 5 days. There's not really that much you need to worry about, in terms of coming off the fast. Obviously, you want to try and eat healthy. If you eat shit, you're going to feel like shit. I've broken a lot of my fast with raw honey, which it goes against what a lot of people say. So again, like I have my own theories on this. Like you basically, yes, you don't want to put in a bunch of food that's going to require a lot of digestion effort because your digestive system just went to sleep for a few days or a week or 11 days, right? So you're trying to wake it up slowly. Something like raw honey basically gives you a ton of energy, but it has all the enzymes in it, so it requires actually zero digestion. So that's just a way of kind of stimulating the body and getting yourself back into this adjustment phase of like eating food again and calories again. But what I'll do is obviously on a dry fast when I'm not drinking at all is I'll first of all have water. And so I'll just put like some lemon juice and sprinkle it in water and have like that. And just like 1 liter, I'll sip it like for an hour or something, just like really slowly. And then maybe like a couple hours later, I might just break my fast with raw honey and maybe also some fruit. It really depends. Like I just try and go light as possible. For shorter fast, like 3 to 5 day, you don't have to worry about any of that. You can literally just chow down a chicken or something like it. Honestly, if you're fairly healthy before and after, it's not gonna make a huge difference. So like I've broken shorter fasts with very little care for this. I think the issue is more mentally as well. When you start eating again, it's like everything tastes so good. You just want to keep eating and eating and eating. And again, that's the sort of feasting and fasting balance, right? When you imagine you were fasting because you couldn't find food, you were hunting for 5-10 days, you suddenly found like a bunch of food, you just eat everything you could. And obviously the food we have around us today is like not always the best kind of food to be chewing down in huge quantities. So like I've probably overdone it on the raw honey where I've eaten too much, but there's limited downside except a few farts. So it's not going to damage you much. But other fasts, where I've like eaten let's say honey and then maybe some chicken and then maybe some ice cream and then like you're just going from one thing to another, like your body wants all those sensations back again. So you have to be quite careful with that 1-2 days where your environment is when you're coming off a fast. That's the part people don't control for. They think, it's just getting into the fast, but coming out of the fast is just as important. And after that 1-2 days has passed, then a lot of that immediate sensation seeking will calm down as well. So that's definitely something to think about. It's like that 1-2 days you're coming off. You want to be in a good environment, good space. And what I would now do is like I pre-buy the foods. So I already stock my fridge up, and it's there, and that's all I'm going to have access to when I break the fast. So then it's really
definitely,
right?
Definitely. Out of curiosity, and so obviously, it's like you're saying, you're in a completely different place now. Your ability and like your light adaptation, your regular exposure. When are you planning to even go for another one for this year? Another fast, a dry fast? Or
it's a good question. I think that this is something I've also had to find a balance with. Like I said, there's a cost to everything. So you really want to be as strong as possible going into a fast. And so I don't personally think there's much benefit to doing it beyond once a year. Like I've tried to, because I enjoy it so much, the fitting before and after becomes a bit addictive as well in that sense of like you feel really amazing. I was doing like a crazy amount of exercise afterwards for a few months with zero soreness, zero anything, because you just have such freedom. Your whole body gets rebuilt with stem cells and things. You look at this process of fasting, it's like amazing, and science is only just starting to measure it. So you have this sort of really big high that goes on for months after a long fast, and so you're just like, yep, this feels good, I want to do it again. But you need to make sure your body is strong and obviously resilient to handle that stress. And I think more than once a year to put that much stress and catabolism on is probably difficult for most people. So I'd say once a year is like all you really need to do if you're just trying to extend health and longevity, right? How much damage is going to really accumulate more than in a year that you need to clean out? I think once a year is probably fine. Even once every probably 18 months, 2 years is probably fine for most people. So for me, I try and do it once a year. Like it's interesting, when I've tried to do it more often, I've had to use willpower and it hasn't worked. It just hasn't felt like my body wasn't into it. So it's more like I was forcing it from the mind. And that's also really interesting to know where stuff's coming from. Like you want to do something, but if it's not working, then something, where is it coming from? Where's the resistance? So I think my body just wasn't ready after the last fast to do it again so soon. And so, yeah, I would say give it at least a year. And what I'm doing now this time is just trying to make sure, again, my body's really, really strong before I go into it. I'll probably do one in the summer. It's coming up to May now. So probably like June, July, August sometime. I'll see when I have time free and just try and get, at least 2 weeks in my calendar, and then set my goal for 11 days as a minimum, because that's what my belief system is now, and then see what happens after that.
Okay, so that was kind of my follow-up question, which you touched on there. I guess, like you're saying, you have to build up yourself, but so per fasting window that you create, whether it be a few days to couple weeks, do that with frequency preferably no more than once a year. Not that it's like a rule of thumb, but like the benefits seem to be sufficient enough. Okay.
Yeah, it's what seems to work for me. Like I think you can do shorter fasts for sure. Like honestly, people do 2-3 day fasts because that's all they can do. You can do those once a month or once a quarter because it's not taxing your body the same way, and you get a lot of benefits from doing that. You know, if you're just trying to clean up your digestion system, some people have leaky gut, some people have food allergies, some people are just tired, you know, or just have coffee addiction or whatever it is, like sugar addiction. Those things you can clear out again. Like I said, that reset happens within 2-3 days. So a 2-3 day dry fast is massively beneficial. Once you're kind of, you know, into the longer dry fasting, the shorter dry fasts don't have as much appeal because you've already gone beyond that a little bit. So I would say it depends kind of where you are on that journey, but shorter dry fasts, yeah, once a month, once a quarter is completely fine.
Nice one, cheers.
Cool. So Ollie had a question, said, what is the big red flags to watch out for when dry fasting? To be honest, like that first one I did, I told you about, I hit about 2 days and I was just bonking. Like I literally had trouble to stand up. And that was when I was like, okay, I'm not going to force this. This is just, you know, my body's not ready for it. So I would say probably it's easy to ease in with water fasting and the shorter dry fasts, like 1-2 days once you've done some water fasts, because you just have that sort of knowing a little bit more in your body and what to look for. But it's that sort of nausea. If it doesn't go away, your body temperature will go up. Like you will sort of feel like you have a fever, and that's quite normal. But again, if it feels like you're just burning up or something, like it's not going away or it's not tolerable, then that's something to pay attention to. It's natural that your body temperature will go up because it's burning a bunch of fat for fuel, and that raises the body temperature. So it's like you go into sort of a mini fever, and people might freak out if they didn't know what to expect, right? So these symptoms are like entirely normal, but again, in your mind, you can project and just overwork yourself into some sort of state. So if you end up doing that somehow, just psyching yourself out of it, then, you know, you don't have to continue. If that's the edge of where you're at, then it's more of a mental game, actually. But yeah, I would say water fasting, definitely I wouldn't do beyond, personally I wouldn't do beyond 5 days now, because I just feel that the cost to longer water fast isn't worth it. Just get used to it and then just do dry fast. That's my personal recommendation, just based on what I've played around with, right? Because longer water fasts are going to have a cost. It's harder to come back from. Like it took me longer to build up my sort of strength again and everything. Whereas after dry fast, you know, even the 11-day dry fast, within a couple of days, I was totally fine. I was just as strong as I was. And I was actually working out every single day on a water fast and a dry fast. So it wasn't like, this is the other thing, is that people think you need to like stop doing everything and rest. And it's true to a degree that you don't want to overtax yourself. But again, if you don't use your muscles, they atrophy faster. So it's good to give them a little bit of like workout and stress. And I was just doing yoga. I wasn't doing anything crazy. You know, some push-ups, some pull-ups, but nothing beyond what I do every day. So because I already work out every day, I can carry on doing that, right? If you don't work out every day, probably that additional stress will just be too much. So it's like I said, going to the fast as strong as possible so you can carry those habits over and you can maintain that muscle mass so you're not losing it. But yeah, I definitely got weaker on a water fast, and I needed to rest a lot more, sleep a lot more. On a dry fast, I sleep like 1-2 hours a night. That's the other thing, that you just don't need to sleep. So all kinds of, you know, things happen in the body, and you're like, well, I've got this time, I can meditate, I can work, I can do whatever I want to do. But you get so much more time back as well, and you realize that even this idea of eating every day is probably not necessary. Like I experimented now with, you know, this idea of eating every other day. So you eat, let's say you eat one day without a window, just normal whatever you want to eat, and then the next day you don't eat anything or drink anything, and then so it's like a whole 24, 36-hour period, and then you eat again the next day. And that's actually probably closer again to like what we would have had access to in terms of just day to day, right? You have constant fridge on your back when you're traveling around, whatever, nomadic, unless you're a goat herder or something, you know, you wouldn't have that constant access. So I think that's probably easy to do when you're outside a lot. If you're indoors and you're not getting that ATP from the sun, like that's really, really hard to maintain. And so I've had that balance of obviously working on a laptop, having a business online and things, and still getting sucked back into being inside a lot, and just trying to find that balance like day to day. But yeah, there's no major other red flags I can think of when it comes to dry fasting. To your question, Ollie, I don't know if that answers it. Go on, Emil.
Yeah, there's just one thing I want to add, which can be really beneficial for people who wants to try this out. This you can also do it cyclical, actually. So if you, let's say you go into 1 day or 2 days of dry fasting and you feel like, wow, this is what I can do. The body's super thirsty now. I need to rehydrate or refeed or whatever. Then you can do that for 1 day slowly, or for half day, or for one meal, or how much you need, and then go back into the dry fasting again, and it will actually extend the benefits from the dry fast you already did. So you're not canceling the whole process. You're actually just refeeding, rehydrating, and then going back into it. And I guess that's also very similar to how the eating patterns were in the old days, when they would find some food, and it probably wouldn't be enough to kind of kick them into anabolism, but they would still be having another day or two more days with fasting the day after. So it's kind of like the cyclical method instead, where you do it as long as you can go and then refeed. So it doesn't have to be that uncomfortable actually. And then you can extend the periods over time and work up to how long you wanna go. And I think actually from researching and reading and meeting a lot of people in fasting circles and breatharians and all that, I think there's literally no limits to where you can go. If you manage to clear out everything from your body that's not to the highest good of regenerating the cells and all, taking out all the sickness, and really connecting to the sun, really connecting, having a pure, clean mind, having gotten rid of a lot of fear, you can go like 3-4 months without food or water if you want to, and just take in from the universe, from the planets, from the stars. There's something called the microcosmic orbit in Taoism, which is a technique where you connect to all the really powerful elements in nature, and they also give you energy. And I haven't I studied it quite a bit, but I haven't tried it myself yet. But it came to me this morning. I actually wanted to do a fast this morning, and it came to me that I need to look up this method again and try to work with that, because I think if you manage to, or I believe that if you manage to tap into these energies, then the food will become way less important, and then you can always do it cyclical. So if you really feel like, now I need something to refill, then you can just take a little bit and then work with it that way, and then play with it. And as Michael says, really feel into it. How is it working on the body? How is my heart rate? Am I feeling stressed and all these things? And if it gets too much, then just refeed a little bit or drink a little bit and then go from there. It doesn't have to be either or with this, I think. So you can just feel your way and then work on it, because that's, you know best, your body knows the best. Even the best books can't teach you what your body knows and your intuition knows when you really tap into it.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Like, you read a lot of books and get a lot of ideas, and then in the end you have to just test all this theory on yourself and then see what works for you. And it's going to be really different for everyone. So what I just shared was just my own sort of individual journey. What I would say is, it's definitely easier in nature, like what you said about the microcosmic orbit and pulling in energy from nature. Like, I actually find it hard to dry fast without access to water in the ocean, just because there's so much energy there, and obviously stepping into the water, you're taking in moisture through your skin, so it just makes that process easier when you're not drinking water. But when I've tried to do it in other places, it just hasn't felt effortless. It felt like it's requiring a lot of strength or something, and some, again, like forcing it. So for me, it's weird, but like, fast should be effortless for me now. That's how it should actually be. Whereas initially you're going to have to use some willpower to overcome that initial whatever uncertainty or fear or whatever. But then you sort of really learn to listen to your body and know, okay, when to stop, when to start. And sometimes I've set a goal, I said, I'm going to fast for 30 days and nothing happened. It's just like, no, body's like, fuck you. So you just really have to get your ego and your mind out of the way and just really listen to the body. When it's ready, it'll kind of let you know. And like I said, the first time I did that 7-day dry fast was totally effortless. I didn't think about fasting. I just was like, I was paying attention to my body. I'm like, actually, I'm not hungry. What's going on? Let me just stop eating. So yeah, go on, Lynn.
Yeah, I always find it interesting how, because like, again, raised some points that, the evolution of our environment has evolved a lot faster than we have, physically, and on a cellular level as well.
The modern environment, you mean?
Yes, that's one. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we keep finding it difficult. So I think, or we keep separating ourselves, not we personally, but as a society, we seem to separate ourselves from the animal kingdom. And if you think about, like you were just saying, even if some people, it's hard to imagine not eating for a few days as a human, if you look at some of the most powerful predators on the planet, like tigers, leopards, jaguars, sharks, their frequency of eating is actually very, very small. Well, that's part of their life. They spend most of the time hunting, and it's just, when you were saying, I'm like, that right there is a clear example. And they're still considered some of the most powerful creatures on this planet, like physically. And yet, if you know conventional wisdom, recent conventional wisdom, they should be malnourished and just struggling. But
Yeah.
For everyone who has pets, or everyone who's been around a cat or a dog or horses or another animal, as soon as they they feel just a little less than 100%, they start fasting, or they start eating some kind of weed that makes them puke, and then they start fasting, and they actually don't eat or drink, so they also dry fasting, and they'll keep doing it until they feel better again. They know exactly how it works, and if they have a virus or parasite or whatever it is they have, then they'll just start fasting, and as soon as they feel better, they'll start eating a little bit, and that's exactly how we're supposed to do it as well. So it makes a lot of sense if you look at look into nature or look at the animals. They are way more connected into how it's really supposed to be. So,
we ever hear people go, "Oh my God, my cat's not eating, my dog's not eating." So, that's a good point. And it's it's a natural trigger. But I'm wondering if that is because of the way we've managed to change our environment so rapidly. I mean, I'm not talking from when we became able to get involved with agriculture and control. I'm talking like the last few hundred years. Like, it's just rapid changes on a mass scale, and our bodies are just still tuned to live that way. And then, so I guess it's not, I don't know where it is in this stage. I'm sure everyone's different to some extent. People's bodies are evolving at a slightly quicker pace, but that's thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years compared to a few hundred. I guess, it's not enough time to have adapted, surely, to the point where we can eat as we want to and stay healthy. Because I always used to think that, well, not that, it could still be the point, I don't know. But always it's consideration that, say levels of illnesses have increased. I'm thinking, well, maybe that's just because detection's a lot better. But it could also be because, obviously, the most obvious one is the change in how we live in our lives. And I think, probably one of the bigger reasons why we are just having these massive increases, because it's even strange when I of people who are textbook healthy, who are getting cancers, who are getting, and that's what kind of confuses a lot of people and think, well, what's the point?
Maybe the textbook's rubbish.
There we go. That's exactly what I was going to say. And that's it's what we're using as a point of information could actually be incorrect. It's not just about just being overtly ill, overtly obese isn't alone a sign. It's a sign of being unhealthy. Like you're saying, having rock our six-pack abs. What have we done to get that? It could be just as damaging. Yeah.
When it comes to shorter term illnesses and stuff, I think we're so used to taking an aspirin or painkiller or something to kind of suppress the symptom, and then that didn't cure anything. You just shove something down, and then it's going to come back a few months later with some other nasty version of it. So you look at the animals, they, like Emil was saying, they just stop eating and drinking for a few days, and so that's just dry fasting, and they know that's what's going to get them back to 100% as soon as the fastest way possible. Doesn't matter how much good grass-fed whatever you put in front of them, they're not going to touch it. And then humans, we kind of override that because either our parents or grandparents say, no, you have to eat something, you're sick, you lose your energy or whatever, just some sort of brainwashing, conditioning, or you don't think about it and you just try and suppress it with medication. So I think the shorter fasting is super useful if you feel like a cold coming on, or you just something, you're less than 100%. I just stop eating, again, just for a day or two. And I've done that sometimes. If I'm traveling a lot and I feel really tired or something, I'll just fast for a day or two and then I'm totally fine again. But if you put food in when you're not well, you're basically taxing yourself twice, because the digestive system is super taxing on the body. It requires a lot of energy to do it. And so you're just basically putting more work on yourself when you should be resting. So this concept of resting, really resting, is actually just abstaining from everything. And if you're in sun and nature and obviously getting energy from there, it's a lot easier to do than this sort of, people are so carb adapted and not fat adapted that any point of time where they're not chugging in carbs and calories in their body, suddenly just energy bonks. And when you constantly like this in a carb cycle, you can't really fast because without some pain or discomfort, because you're going to have this period of adjustment to get in this ketosis. So I actually think it's easy to go get fat adapted first when you do things like bulletproof coffee, which I'm not a fan of today, but that actually really helped me get into a period where I was shrinking my window, so I was burning more fat for fuel. And then slowly I had to stop drinking the bulletproof coffee because my body knew how to burn fat, and it started burning its own fat. So if you're in the early that state of fat adaptation, you can go into a fast much easier. You're not going to have this that people who are just carb, sugar, crazy people. And this is the 1 and 2 getting cancer, right? It's just these people that just have constant carbs, constant growth, constant cancer growth. And we weren't designed like that. Definitely some diseases are detected better, but we never used to eat like this. And so our physiology is just, it's 10,000 BC, man, and we're living in a completely different time, and not aware of the cost. So much of the modern textbook is all based on just recent scientific discoveries of the last 100, 200, 300 years, saying this thing works for this thing works for this, and then people develop theories of diet and exercise on top of that, and it's all completely missing context of how our bodies evolved in nature. And yeah, there's just so many missing pieces there that when you really spend time in nature, like really get back into nature for 20, 30 days, 2 months, 3 months, like consistently outside more than you're inside, you're a completely different animal. You're more like that lion, you're more like that tiger in the jungle, in the Sahara, than you are your current modern body. So that sort of animalistic aspect, I think, comes when you're more wild and more in nature, and you really feel the power of your body in a different way than if you're just at a desk all the time and eating some Marks and Spencer sandwich. Like, I used to do that for years. So that's not what your body is designed to do, man. Go on, Emil.
Very interesting. Sorry if I interrupted, but it's very interesting also when you look at the body when you do get a disease, or if you do get sick, you actually lose your appetite immediately. And every good parent will try to stuff some soup in you, or stuff some other bread, or buy your favorite dish or whatever, try to get you to eat, which is actually the complete opposite of what you should be doing, because the body needs all the energy it can to remove the disease from the body, instead of using 80% of the energy for digestion, something that you're not really needing at the moment. So again, with the intuition, if you really, the body knows everything. It's the same with the cold showers and the cold therapy. You don't really have to do anything. You just let the body do the work and get your mind out of the way. It's the same with this thing. The body knows perfectly what to do, and it's definitely detrimental to the health to try to force feed people who are on the sick bed and trying to heal themselves, because they don't need the food. So,
well, you often find they say, I'm not hungry, I can't eat. Like that happened to me this week. This long week, my other half was really ill, and I'm jumping, Ollie, sorry, mate. Our other half was really, really not poorly, and I still was finding myself, before this was that, have a little something, but I was making sure it was super highly, like the food I was asking to eat was food that in my view was easy to be digested. So no like vegetables, no red meats. It was kind of like nothing with too thick a cell wall that doesn't require too much breakdown. I was trying to have things like liquid, like lemon juice in some water, honey, like raw honey I was giving her as well. So I actually hate sweet things, it's really, really strange. But it made it a lot harder to give her honey. I was like, okay, but just have this is nice. I think it'd help, but it may be even better to just let it be, But like I said, before I can probably push it on her, I'm going to have to, when I feel there's something coming on, I'm going to have to try it myself. And then I can say, okay, I'm still here and better. Next time it happens to you, give it a try. Try not to eat anything.
Definitely, sorry, I'll let Ollie talk right after this, but definitely just to your point there about your girlfriend, if you're not fat adapted, it's quite hard to tell them not to eat, because like I said, they'll just bonk and they'll feel worse. So in that case, like same with my wife, what I do sometimes, I'll make this drink, which is if she's not feeling well, I might fast, but for her, I'll make like lemon juice, honey, cayenne pepper, and turmeric, and I just like in a hot drink. And if you make that drink every 3 hours or 4 hours, like 2 or 3 times a day, basically, next day that cold's gone, whatever, it's just completely gone. So you're fasting from heavier foods, and that's still a form of fasting in that you're not taxing your digestion, but you're giving something to the body that is enough energy just to keep it going while it's cleaning and doing its thing. And actually also provokes a fever response when you take cayenne pepper and things like that. So it's again, it's raising body temperature. As soon as you raise body temperature, you can kill pretty much whatever bug and virus is causing that problem. But yeah, just an idea.
Lemon, honey, turmeric, and cayenne pepper.
Yeah. Anyways, go on, Ollie.
What's up? I think that one of the things that many people have, right, when they're trying to get into fasting is just, I think maybe for some people, obviously fasting is great. I think a lot of people are like, what? Fasting? I remember talking to people about that a while ago, and then people were kind of sort of, just the level of outrage and fear around that sort of idea is crazy. And I think that, you would try that if you haven't done it before. And just the physical and mental homeostasis drive, your body just stepping out of its comfort zone just wants to shut everything down straight away. And so I think that there is something to be said for that approach of, if you are not fat adapted, you're going to be absolutely screwed if you just try and jump in and you've got, bad environment, bad water, bad light and stuff. And I think that, for me, I know it's a little bit different, and I'm kind of looking to get into dry fasting, but I would used to do a lot of that sort of thing where I would just eat much more easy to digest foods. And that would kind of slowly make me more and more fat adapted. I would even do some fruit fasts as well. I mean, I believe kind of once you have the flexibility within the the cell, you know, in terms of switching between the two energy pathways, then it's kind of a little bit, once you've dug that hole, that pathway is there, you know, so you do whatever works for you personally. But I think that in terms of like reducing your calories and kind of easing your way into it, at that point, if you're kind of listening to this, for example, and you're like, oh man, you know, this all just sounds too bonkers for me, or you try it and then you get a little wobble or whatever, I definitely think going out there and just sort of cutting out the things you shouldn't eat first, you know, like sugar, refined flour, vegetable oils and stuff like that, just kind of allows you to absorb much more nutrition from the foods that you're eating, and you're not going to have an autophagy effect, but you can definitely minimize the inflammation you have in your body and stuff. But yeah, that whole homeostasis thing is also a mental thing, right? So you know, you're just gonna have this tension. I guess you could just call it tension, right? When you try and step out of something that's so far out of your comfort zone, and you see people who do it without any kind of being in tune with their bodies, and their body just gets tense. A friend of mine comes to mind who heard that, didn't know a lot about nutrition, and he heard that green tea was good for weight loss. So he took 30 bags of green tea.
Fried his nervous system or something.
Yeah, he ended up in hospital.
Oh my god.
You know?
Poor guy.
But he just chugged it away. He didn't know that feeling.
That's the more is better philosophy we live in, yeah.
Yeah, and that thing of just trying to step out of something, that sense of like the body just doesn't want to change. Basically, it wants to hold on to where it is, and the mind does as well. It tenses up, and so definitely, you know, having different strategies to ease into it, and is good, and not feeling good straight away doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't work, you know.
Yeah, I would say like the dry fast is maybe an extreme form, and it really depends on your current health level. Like I said, if like all of us guys, I would consider right now to be fairly healthy, right? We don't have made any major issues, so I think I would recommend to any of you a 1, 2, 3 day dry fast. You'd be totally fine. But if I'm talking to other people, I know they've got some diabetes or some other issue, like they're going to have to really be more careful stepping into this stuff. And it's just as much because they have a lot of internal disease already that the body's already trying to fight. And when you fast, you throw off a lot of shit into your body to deal with. So it's like you're artificially creating a fever or a sort of temporary, war in your body, and it's just killing off all the disease cells. So yeah, it's definitely not for everyone to start straight away. One point when it comes to like inflammation, which is really interesting, is like a lot of diseases are inflammation based, and a lot of inflammation requires moisture and water. So this is another reason why I don't really recommend juice fast or water fast when you're trying to deal with diseases, because if you take out moisture, you remove half the problem with diseases. Diseases cannot survive in an absence of water. And so when you dry fast, you're removing inflammation. That applies to clogged sinuses, like Peter's asking about. That applies to a lot of sort of inflammation that people get when they have any kind of issues with foods they're eating and stuff. If you sense that, like a short dry fast, 24 hours, can just strip out all the water and make that healing process so much faster. And if you're water fasting, it actually takes way longer because your body's just constantly got moisture to deal with in the body. And so again, if you look into the TCM theory of like elements and things, how different elements affect the body and balance and stuff, it makes a bit more sense. But yes, this idea that inflammation, it requires moisture in the body, and you can strip that away really quickly with a dry fast. So it's just a much faster way to healing sort of acute conditions as well as sort of longer fast for chronic conditions.
It's interesting you said that about diabetes, because I'm probably the only one who's probably read this. One time I did jump onto some mainstream media, BBC News, talking about clinical trials. They were using fasting for insulin resistance to help treat it. And I was like, flipping hell, this is the BBC News. I was like, okay, that's some very unhappy drug companies right now reading up what's going on here. I thought, didn't they get our payment? But it's interesting you saying that. I did, again, my brain remembers most random things. I remember a few months ago, like, this is brilliant. And then they also did an article on sun gazing, and the correlation with myopia, like lack of sunlight and so on. It was interesting seeing that pop up.
Actually, I'm going to share the article on myopia. That was not a direct link to sun gazing, but I made the connection because BBC would never make it for you. But yeah, go on, Ollie.
Actually, I think I saw that study. I think didn't they cure them of diabetes?
Yeah, but they said, obviously because it's not been signed off here and there, but basically it cured and they did it with mice and some people. I was like, wow, okay, yeah. So yeah, you're right. Basically, they use the word cure, but then it obviously, like a lot of these, just disappears into the ether, you know. But yeah.
Yeah. What I wanted to say before was there's this theory that if you drastically reduce your water and in fact increase the salt, because you have more salt in your blood, then the electric transmissions basically between the cells in your body becomes more efficient. So that just popped into my mind. Like
it's also why you shouldn't overhydrate. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, so people actually use that to raise their body temperature as well. And so it just raises your metabolism. And then, like, there's a book called Eat for Heat, I think it's called. And this guy sort of, don't worry about carbs or whatever. Just stop drinking water. Like, all right, okay. But that kind of makes a little bit more sense if we're talking about like the sun gazing stuff, you know, microcosmic orbit stuff like Taoism, internal energy and chi or what have you, connection to electricity, and healing disease in terms of having less moisture, so the cells are closer together, therefore more salt, so they can communicate more. I was wondering if you read about that or what you thought about that.
Yeah, I've got a few thoughts, something related anyways. So you actually asked earlier, what's the big red flag about dry fasting? And I kind of didn't pick up on this, but I think people always worry about dehydration, right? And so you have to talk a bit about water, and now we're getting into it. So if you look at like cellular hydration, what people think of as being hydrated, and they just think, oh, if I drink more water, I'll be hydrated, is actually the complete opposite of how a lot of things work in the body. So it's a little bit counterintuitive, but basically there's a few things here. One is obviously the quality of water you're normally drinking day to day. This is why personally I don't drink alcohol. I spend all my money on glass bottled water because it's a far better investment for me. So I only drink stuff that I really feel great. I don't drink tap water. I don't drink plastic bottled water. I think all that stuff just got too much shit for my body to handle. But basically whatever you're drinking, your body will convert it into a form it can use in the cell. So the higher quality water you're drinking, the easier that conversion is, and the better quality water you have in the cell. Now, if you look into, like, Jared Pollock's got a book called Fourth Phase of Water, it talks about this property of water. And basically when it goes into the body, and you have sunlight hitting the body, you have this sort of, it creates a charge, basically a charge gradient in the water. So some of the water will be positively charged, some of the water will be negatively charged right next to each other. And this gradient, this differential, is what actually powers a lot of the cell communication. So if you don't have it in that structure, in that from sunlight and with good quality water, you basically are you're not hydrated. So you find out you drink some water, you're peeing it out an hour later because your cell can't hold it. You can't hold on to the water. And this is a really important concept. Before you ever go into dry fasting, make sure your body is like chronically hydrated. And that doesn't mean drink more water the day before you dry fast. It means a period of weeks and months to really understand what is cellular hydration and how to test it. So basically, if you're eating a lot of dehydrating foods, like you cook your foods a lot, you put a lot of salt in your foods, you know, some salt is okay, but some people way over salt their foods, or they're buying prepared meals which have crazy levels of salt in them. There's just certain habits that we're doing today. Eating a lot of sugar dehydrates you, eating a lot of alcohol dehydrates you, drinking a lot of alcohol. So if you understand those principles and you know what is causing dehydration in the body, what's causing hydration, you go into a dry fast that is strong as possible. That means you are fully hydrated. And because I'm spending 8-10 hours in the sun now, like my body is super hydrated. I'm drinking the best quality water anyways. I don't really drink much at all during the day. I drink maybe once or twice a day after a workout, and in between meals and stuff. So again, I don't drink with meals because it's not great for digestion, but I try and make sure I drink in between meals. And that's a completely different scenario to try and go into a dry fast if you're drinking tap water or plastic bottled water you thought was healthy, or I was eating a lot of cooked food and stuff, and other refined processed fats and sugars that just, like, those vegetable oils, those refined seeds, those refined sugars, that stuff is the worst in terms of like dehydration for your body. Your body it steals so much energy and so much water from the body and the cells to digest. So yeah, that's a point I had to make.
So would you say that? I also imagine coffee too, right? Because that's a very strong diuretic, which squeezes the water out.
Yeah, to a degree, like, because I had everything else dialed in, I didn't feel too much difference drinking a coffee. When I was drinking coffee, I was only drinking once a day anyways. If you're drinking 3-4 cups of coffee, I mean, then yeah, come on, get a grip, man. You got to like figure out where your energy gap is coming from and fix that. But I say for most people, it's probably not an issue just having 1 cup a day.
Okay, so you were saying like you need to figure out, you need to get that dialed in first. So
Before I dry
guess
fast.
like, yeah, like, so mitochondrial function is like the gatekeeper of that function.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. It's all related to that, like how the cell uses water in the body. And then also how mitochondrial health works is also related to sunlight and infrared and making ATP, which, I kind of talked about. So if you have those systems sort of optimized and working and upregulated, then a dry fast is just easy. It's just like the lion. He's not like, shit, man, I have to dry fast tomorrow. How am I going to do this? He's just fucking living it, just doing it. And we're just using our monkey brain, and we're always getting in the way of it because it was something we haven't done. But it is effortless in that sense. Like, you just feel really good. You don't need to eat. The only time I actually reminded of food now is when I step back into the house and I see there's a fridge and I look inside. I'm like, food, right? It's just like my monkey brain. But if I'm outside, I don't think about food all day long. I could probably go days again without food right now because I'm in pretty good place. But yeah, you want to be chronically hydrated, and that doesn't just mean drinking more water. A glass of tap water a day is the fastest way to disease. The amount of problems you're gonna have, and that's what people are telling you. Drink a glass of water a day. It's complete bullshit.
I've got a question for you guys. So I finally put my order through for my zero water filter system. It's super ridiculous. It's hopefully basically it's like 99.9% like getting rid of all the fun stuff that's in the water system that we get for free from Manchester's government. But I mean, I know that may not still be the best, but I think it's looking like a lot better than my current alternatives. And also, but I'm just thinking, I remember there was something that was mentioned briefly, I think Mike or Emil, I can't remember who it was, so sorry, about how to, once you've because you're talking about, I remember you was using like deionizers in your water at one point to separate. But then, obviously that's not necessarily good for the body as itself. And you mentioned there's certain things we use to reintroduce the good stuff to the water. I just wanted to touch on that. So what kind of things were you using, or do you use to add that? I mean, obviously I know about add in some lemon and stuff like that, I understand. But I mean, what are other things that you were using as well?
Yeah, like it's probably good to have a discussion about water because it's so close related to fasting, especially dry fasting and preparing for it. So like probably the best setup that I've found, and the reason I'm using glass bottled water right now is because I'm traveling, don't really have a good home setup, right? So at home, what I'll do is I'll use a distiller, and that actually strips everything out pretty much. You can measure it with a TDS meter, which is measuring like total dissolved solids in the water. You test that with tap water in cities, it's just like super crazy high, all the lead off the pipes, all the other shit, drug hormone residues, birth control pills, whatever shit ends up in the tap water. So the distiller basically takes all of that out, and you can see the shit left in the bottom of the tank after you run it a few times. That's the stuff that you're normally drinking that people just don't see because it's not visible. So the distiller takes everything out, but then it's essentially dead water. It's got nothing. It's got no minerals, no energy, like no cellular memory. So water actually holds the cellular memory when it's charged a certain way or structured a certain way. And so there's devices that can, again, restructure, recharge, which you can look into. And I've tested a few, and I believe they work. But that's just to give it more of a spring water-like quality. If you see how water runs off the rocks and it's hitting the rocks, it's actually, every time it's hitting something, it's creating a movement. And so you get these sort of whirls and eddies in streams, and that's actually charging the water. And so you can measure, if you have it's called an ORP meter. So this is getting a bit nerdy, but you can measure the charge in the water by the oxidation reduction potential. It's like the negative charge in the water. Just like you have negative charge coming off the earth and electrons, you have the same property in water. And so people are selling molecular hydrogen things, you could like supplements you can put into the water. It gives it that charge. And I actually got some here I can show you. So I use that sometimes when I'm traveling, but you can get these machines that do it for you as well. And it's just better, more economical for a home setup. So you distill it, then you recharge it, but you also remineralize it because you need the minerals in the water to pass information. If you have just distilled water, there's literally nothing in there. So it's not conductive at all. Like Ollie was saying, you need some sort of salts in there. Some people put salt water back in, then obviously recharge it. You can put lemon juice in there, whatever. Is also fine, like cucumber slices, whatever, just to give it that sort of memory and that recharging. But that process is really important, I think, to give it more. The more spring-like it is, the better, basically. And that's what we should all be drinking, is just spring water straight from the spring, but getting as close to that state as possible. The other issue about hydration that I should have mentioned was that if you have access to like cucumbers, fairly cheap, I think it's probably the best source of hydration bar anything. And the reason is that plants, they perfectly structure water in their cells. They know how to hold it. They just do what they do every day. If you peel the skin off the cucumbers, which is where a lot of the anti-nutrients are, and also a lot of the pesticides and shit that get sprayed on cucumbers, and you're just eating the cucumber itself, you can eat 2 or 3 of those and you'll feel super hydrated. Like, you just feel amazing. It's way better than if you just drank a liter of water. Honestly, like, go just try the 2 and compare it for a day. I was going through a period of time when I was just eating cucumbers, and I didn't drink anything. And I can't really get a juicy cucumber I like here in Portugal at the moment, so I'm still kind of using this bottled water now, and now I'm happy to use bottled water, because before, like, my options were tap water, plastic bottled water, or cucumbers, right? So cucumbers, like by far, is the best choice in that environment. And I think it's probably still better than the distilled water and then recharging it and this and that. Like maybe it's a little bit more expensive, but that's what I would say is optimal, is to like compare those things. And just having those foods in your diet on top of water is taking more hydration, more minerals if it's a healthy cucumber grown in good soil and stuff. So these kind of foods, fruits is a different bucket because you're introducing sugar. So because people have so much sugar in the diet already, you need to be pretty metabolically fit to be able to use that strategy for hydration, to use fruits. Kind of Ollie, I think, probably does and is fine because he's pretty active. But for most people, I wouldn't recommend to use fruits for hydration, especially outside of the summer, because you have this issue with sugary carbs should only come with sun in nature. That's how they're brought together. So unless you're living in the tropics or you're in summer, your body won't really like fruits long term. It's just creating some imbalances. And if you're active and metabolically healthy and fit, you can get away with it. But cucumbers has really very little sugar. It doesn't taste sweet at all. So that's an example where you get the hydration, the structured water in the plant without any extra sugar or carbs. Yeah, go on, Ollie, and then Emil.
Yeah, I agree. Like you have to earn your carbs, right? Like you have to.
Totally.
There's that guy who said like Charles Poliquin, that famous French coach, health coach. He said, like, if you have really bad insulin, then you're only allowed like one lick of a prune every quarter. You have to like completely different situation. But I had a couple of questions about what you were saying. The first one is, do you know about like, because I don't actually know much about structured water, because people give me things and so it's diamond water and someone it's almost a bit like Reiki-esque and people put energy stuff into it.
Yeah,
and the other
very mysterious.
Yeah, it's very mysterious, and they'll give you some actual water in a small, as like a mother, like a kombucha mother or something.
To seed future water, is it?
Yeah, put a bit into your thing, and then you wait a bit, and I do taste the difference. The second question is that someone said that you can't get much more structured than fizzy water, carbonated water, so I tried that, and that seemed to have an effect. And then thirdly, if you blended the cucumbers, assuming that you took off the peel, would that actually break the cell in such a way, in your opinion, as to damage the charge and the benefits of it holding onto the water properly?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say just to the cucumbers thing, anytime you cut something or blend it, you're oxidizing it. So the sort of minerals and the energy, the life force of that plant is going to start to degrade. If you drink it within 5-10 minutes, not an issue. But if you carry it around with you all day and that's your water bottle, not a good idea, in my opinion. Then the issue about like these machines, and I haven't tried this when you're talking about the seeding of from like a source of good water, but I think water does have memory, so you can mix like a spring water with some other water, and it will pass some properties of that to the water. There's all kinds of interesting studies on water, how it holds memory and passes information. So there's just way more than humans kind of understand at the moment. But as far as these machines that are selling like ionizers and pH alkalizers, it's all bullshit, to be honest. Like I think it doesn't really do anything. It's just marketing, and people are so dumb and gullible, they fall for a lot of this. You can measure the negative charge with an oxidation reduction potential meter, an ORP meter, and if that's what you're looking for to get this sort of charged, this sort of alive water, that is, I think, the best form of water. And so you can use molecular hydrogen. You can go get it from a spring yourself, and you can measure it with this ORP meter, and it'll show you. And I've tested this as also with some machines like these pH alkalizers. They do change the ORP like temporarily. So for, I run this machine and alkalize it on these stupid $1,000 machines, and I test the ORP afterwards, and it is negative. But then I test it in 20 minutes, and it's already started going up. So it's already starting to lose that property. The only beneficial property was that short-term, thing. So again, if you carried that water around all day thinking you're a genius, you've lost that whatever negative ORP reading within a few hours. But the molecular hydrogen, the one I'm using, which is from Patrick Flanagan, actually holds that ORP reading for up to 24 hours. So, that's something that's a lot more stable. It gives it that property. But that's essentially like living water, just like coming from, like I said, a spring when it's getting charged by hitting the rocks and stuff. That is a property that you see in nature. So you're just trying to mimic that sort of spring water like state.
Nice.
Yep.
And yeah, sorry, I wanted to check about the carbonated water, because obviously carbonated water is sometimes spring water is sometimes naturally carbonated, right? So it what you just said makes a lot of sense, but it's like Sally Fallon, she believes in that. So it's kind of when you because it structures it, I don't really understand too much of the science. I understand a little bit about the memory of water and stuff like this. Yep. But I tried it and it seemed to help a little bit. But yeah, some people say, oh, if you don't have a water structuring machine, just get fizzy water. But
I don't know what your water you're making fizzy. If it's from a spring anyways and it's naturally fizzy, then that's probably fine, right? If it's in plastic, probably not great. But if it's in glass, I actually drink that right now. I drink fizzy bottled water because most of it is fizzy, and they're actually carbonating a bit more than what is naturally there, just to give it a taste. And I don't really think it's an issue. Some people say, over time you might erode your enamel, blah, blah, blah. I think if you have healthy diet and sunlight, you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. But if you have weak bones and calcium issues, probably fizzy water is not a good idea. So it's context dependent. I don't think it gives it the same properties that I'm talking about in terms of the ORP and the plant, what you get in cucumbers. I don't think it's even close, personally. But I haven't looked into it in any great detail. I just drink it like that because that's the best bottled, like glass bottled water source I have available. So I don't think it's necessarily bad. With what I just said, the caveat of having weak bones, but I don't think it's necessarily great either, personally. I just don't know enough about it to say that. Yeah.
okay, nice. Cheers.
Cool. Emil, do you have a question or?
No, I just want to add something that I experienced myself, because I was living in Thailand and eating a lot of fruits and drinking a lot of coconuts and didn't drink water for about 6 months. And then I came.
Emil drinks enough coconut. He doesn't ever need water if you've been around Emil long enough.
Yeah, about 10 coconuts a day. That's enough. It's enough water. But yeah, then I got back to Sweden, and I did start to feel thirsty a little bit. But I started drinking the tap water, and normally the tap water is pretty good here. But I just felt like the body really kind of didn't like the water, or I wasn't too. So again, that's one of the things I'm trying to tune into a lot to recently, the intuition. And when the body tells you that the water is not good, then I think that's probably the best meter you can get in the moment before you buy anything. Because if the body's kind of rejecting it and you don't feel thirsty, you don't feel inclined to start drinking it, then the body's telling you there's something in there that's not good for you. And the funny thing was, then we moved to this other place that has its own private well, and I remember asking Michael about well water and all these things, and I kind of started to get in my head about, instead of just listening to the body, and instead of, and as soon as we got here, I just started drinking a lot of water, and Hannah drank a lot of water, and Nova suddenly was really interested in water, our daughter, and it's just very interesting, and I just think that the water there has some properties that we need, and the body will tell us that, and when we listen, when we stop and listen, and we feel the body, what is really telling us, oh, it's thirsty, it wants this water, then it might be good. But if it's telling you it doesn't taste very well, then there's probably something to it. But just for fun now, I actually think I want to try to order these instruments. What did you say? A TDS instrument and the ORP meter?
Yeah, TDS is total dissolved solids. That's to measure just the shit that you take out by distilling from like tap water. It's all the lead and other shit, hormones, antibiotics that's in tap water. And then the ORP meter is oxidation reduction potential, just measuring the charge of the water itself. So how long it's negatively charged for. If you use those alkalizers, you can see it has an effect, but it's very temporary. And if you use the molecular hydrogen, like those Patrick Flanagan pills I showed you, they actually have much longer, a steady effect of that charging the water.
Yeah, that TDS meter I've got coming through with my. I'm not a product sponsor, not a sponsored or anything, but it's Zero Water brand. The reason I decided to pick it up, someone poured a bottle of wine into it. It just came out as a reading of 000. It was like deep dark red wine. I was like, that's pretty interesting. Okay, I'll send a link for you guys. See, get your 2 pence on it. Just be interested. But I know it's better than what I've currently got access to at the moment. But yeah, it's interesting to finally pull the trigger on it. But yeah, I'll definitely keep tabs in it and see. That's what I was asking about restructuring. I mean, I'm sure it doesn't completely destructure the water because it's not being deionized in this machine. You know, in the filter, it's not being deionized. And I'm not concerned about that. But I thought it'd just be good to add bits anyway. Yeah, I'll link for a link.
All the filters work differently. It's quite hard because they're all saying a lot of marketing and big buzzwords. But with the TDS meter and the ORP meter, you can cut through a lot of bullshit and just see, does it actually give you those properties, before and after. So with tap water, the issue is that apart from distilling, to my knowledge, nothing else gets rid of the chlorine and fluoride sufficiently, other than these really expensive filters you have to replace all the time with these heavy, big units like water filters. So personally, I just don't want to have to replace cartridges and filters all the time. I'll just buy a distiller, and that thing lasts for a year or 2 years, and I'll get a new one if I need to. So for a small family, that's more than enough. You can get bigger ones if you've got a lot of people in your house, whatever, but that seems to run one of those a day is like 5 liters a day, and that's enough for most people if you're if you're eating other hydrated fruits and whatever plants like cucumbers and not dehydrating yourself too much, that's probably enough. But that's how I do when I'm at home.
Is there anything we can use to measure the electrical frequency of the water, whether it's carrying electricity? I don't think the ORP measures that, right?
When you say frequency, like it's, I don't know how specific you can get there. What property of frequency in the water is it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I guess, yeah, when it's high frequency, you feel vibrating, you feel like it's alive, the memory. If you look at some of these studies from I think it's called Masamoto or something, the Japanese guy who started photographing these waters and telling them bad words, and then the crystallization of the frozen water would look ugly, and then he would say some beautiful stuff or play some nice music, and the structure would be really beautiful, like this amazing crystallized.
So it's interesting. Like, you know, some people won't buy into this, and it's not really necessary to buy into it or not. But if you look at the structure of the water, like what I was saying about when you distill it, it's basically dead. It has no structure. So you put it under the microscope, it's not going to have any of those nice crystalline things you see in ice crystals and things, right? It's just not going to have that. This is why you use that machine to recharge it and vortex it. So water vortexes are actually the best way to recharge it and give it that structure. And then if you add the molecular hydrogen, you're just basically adding to the negative charge. So basically, every time you have a negative charge on something, you can it's almost like an antioxidant you can then use to flush out stuff in your body. You know, when you're sitting and grounding, you're taking the same thing in the electrons through the earth. It's a similar kind of antioxidant mechanism. So that's what the RP meter is testing for, is just a negative charge. But the water vortexing itself is what gives it the structure, gives it that cellular memory, which is like just like what it's getting in the spring when it's falling, you know, through the rocks. So there are actually machines that use rocks and magnets and all kinds of other things to vortex it, but you just get some really simple ones that just spin it like that, and you just see there's like a spiral, just like you can make in the pool with your hand. You know, it's just a whirlpool. And those water vortexes, they're pretty cool. I've tried them. I can feel the difference in the energy in the water. Yeah, so I definitely would get one of those if I could stop traveling.
Cool.
Oh yeah, we actually have some apparently at home. I've got so much stuff in storage in Singapore. I don't know what we've got anymore, but I don't travel with me. But yeah, so water is really important in the context of fasting. I'm trying to think in terms of fasting. Is there any sort of angles to cover? Like, we're coming up on time, about 5 minutes. But yeah, in terms of your experience, guys, with fasting, I don't know if you've had anything interesting insights you want to share, or where you might be stuck, or just not sure in that process, or are you just very happy with how you're using it and it's working for you? Like, yeah, any thoughts on that?
I found that when I was intermittent fasting, I think the best way to do it is to not tell anyone you're doing it.
Sure.
Because everyone wants to tell you why you shouldn't, why you can't.
Or longer fasting or intermittent fasting?
Anything.
Okay.
They'll be dicks. They'll try and leave food on your table in the office. Like, it's just, I'm talking
dicks.
about, yeah, it's the banter. I get it, but I found like, you know, it's staying away from the naysayers. I mean, because it's not, when you think in the long term, you're not jeopardizing your health. It's the opposite you're going for. You know, the assumption is, you know, you got these people telling you it's not healthy while their face is covered in skin conditions, while they're, you know, chronically unwell. They want to tell you how, you know, how you're hurting yourself. You shouldn't do this, Lynn. So I found that just, and I think it's applies to many things in life. Tell people after you've done it, you know. Obviously, unless you need to be held accountable, then that's fine. But then obviously go for a like-minded group of people who will be the right environment to do it. But for fasting and stuff like that, because it's so scary to a lot of people to think, oh my God, are you basically saying the way I've lived my life has been wrong the whole time? Just don't tell anyone. Even after you guys, I mean, it's, as much as you might want to share the good feeling you're having, it's always necessary to try. And that's very straight to keep yourself.
No, it's really good advice. I would say the same thing with people that care about you, is they'll put their fear and their emotions on you, and then you're kind of nat around on top of your own shit and trying to figure out, oh, is this safe or not? Like, no, just listen to your body. Just start obviously slow, like we said, you know, easing into it. Listen to your body. Don't setting crazy goals. But then, yeah, not sharing it just makes it a lot easier to keep that separate from anyone else's sort of drama or reaction.
Yes, that's my bit.
Cool.
Yeah, I actually did one 6-day fast in southern Sweden before it was even springtime. It was before I was too connected to nature and the sun. I was just really connected to the fasting and the cleansing and detoxing and all these different things. But I managed to do 6 days super dry, which was no shower, no water, no washing hands, nothing. And I was in an apartment with very bad lighting, and I was sitting in front of the computer. So I think definitely my mind took over that process and kept me through it, because I didn't feel tired. I didn't feel anything, but I probably used a bit more willpower towards the end than I could have
Sure.
if I'd been living outside in a tent or something. So I'm definitely going to try that next time.
Mm.
And I actually didn't feel the physical limit before I started. I had some friends over and we went for a long hike, and there was this kind of steep hill, and I thought I wanted to run up there, and then I felt like, okay, the body is not working as it normally does. So that was
Yeah, sometimes you feel you have more energy than you do, and you can overexert yourself on a fast for sure. Yeah.
And then I stopped the fast from there. But I would love to do. I would love to do longer one, especially now with the nature connection and the sun and just generally feeling way better, and the yoga and the qigong. How I feel like I can top up with energy from the universe or from the sun or from anywhere, and then try to go with that and see what that takes me. I find that very interesting.
Yeah. Even the 11-day fast, the dry fast I did recently, I was actually only outside maybe 2-3 hours a day because the sun was quite intense, and so I'm at that point not as a sun adapted as I am now, and so I still felt I needed to go inside and cool down, and I was still working and indoors, and I just felt cooler inside in the heat, away from the heat. So I'm interested as well to see, like, now I can take more heat and maybe be in the sun longer, what difference that is in terms of what percentage of time I'm outdoors, indoors, and how that affects feeling of tired or hydration or energy and stuff. Like your body will just get stronger and stronger as you go through these cycles. These almost like, that's what I want to kind of say, is these almost like cycles you go through, and every time you come out this cycle, you come out stronger because you just appreciate that other sort of side that normally gets neglected. Like I said, if you just have anabolism and growth all the time and you miss out the other half of the cycle, that's half of life. That's literally half the equation of life. Your body's trying to cope without that. And when you give it back and you come out the other side of that cycle, you come out stronger every single time. And so this is something that just regenerates and makes you stronger and younger. And I think it's completely underestimated how long humans can live and how good we can feel, because you look at like the studies on mice and other animals, when they're exposed to fasting and regular fasting, their lifespans go up 30-40%. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. In animals, some other animals it's even higher. So I think we're not even reaching limits of close to what we're able to do because we're inside all the time. And you combine that with other sort of biohacks and things I'm talking about for longevity. Like, the body's pretty incredible what it can tolerate and what it's designed to take in. So I'll get into sun energy and how to upregulate that on a different show. It's coming up on time now, but that's definitely a big part of this, is like using all those things to strengthen your body and going into fast as strong as possible, because then you're just going to be able to get more out of that every time you do it. But yeah, I would say once a year for the longer cycles, and then you can do it every month or quarter for like 2-3 days stuff. If you're just sort of maintaining, and you're maybe in a city, you're worried about pollution or EMF or radiation or any sort of damages happening on a daily basis because of your environment, then those shorter fasts are really useful as well.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, guys, I'm gonna call it here unless you got any more questions. But
Thanks, guys.
It's been really fun. We'll catch you all on Thursday.
Thank you.
See you next week. Yeah, Thursday. Thank you, guys.
All right, ciao, guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.